Hello, and welcome to the Employee Safety Podcast from Alert Media, where you'll hear advice from experienced safety leaders on how to protect your people and business. I'm Peter Steinfeld. Today's guest is Brian Jansen, an executive protection expert and strategic advisor with over 30 years' experience working for Fortune 500 companies, high net worth individuals, and startups. His expertise focuses on advancing executive protection programs through innovation and technology. Today's conversation explores the evolution of executive protection, common pitfalls organizations face, and how leaders can build trust and structure into their security programs. Let's hear from Brian. Hey, Brian, I'm super excited for this session today. Thanks so much for being here.
Hey, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Well, let's go ahead and jump right in. What inspired you to start consulting, and how does your work help advance executive protection and the industry in general?
I think I have a pretty unique set of experiences and opportunities that I've had throughout the years as far as executive protection, and being able to spend about 17 years on the internal EP program side, the service purchaser as well, and then another 13 years or so on the service provider side. So I have a unique approach because I understand both sides of the partnership that usually needs to take place within executive protection. Basically, my role and my goal is to help EP programs and EP service providers build better.
Well, what exactly is executive protection, and what's the state of EP today? And has the function really changed in recent years?
My approach to executive protection, which I've had some success with over the years, is not just having executive protection be equated to security. So really expanding the value proposition of executive protection to basically keeping people safe, happy, and productive. Now, to explain that a little bit deeper, the safe piece, it's in that order on purpose because the safe piece is basically safety and security. So that's your technical skills, your skills in close protection, the best practices of keeping people safe and keeping them safe while moving from point A to point B, and residential protection and protective intelligence. So the safe piece is pretty deep. And then the happy piece is really where you basically take your risk mitigation activities and you understand also your principal's culture, the organization's culture, and your principal's preferences. So then you have to customize that all together. It's very important to do that for long-term success, because if you don't look at all of those things, there's a chance that your program and your people won't fit into the organization or fit with the principal. So keeping them happy by customizing what it is that you do. But the biggest return on investment of executive protection is productivity support. That means that we're not going to save someone's life every day, but we can help them optimize their time, energy, and focus. So if you think about your leaders in the organization that are receiving executive protection, and we're helping them optimize their time, energy, and focus, that return on investment is big because it then helps them be more effective in their job, more effective when they travel. And an example of that is an exec admin once said, "Hey, you guys make it easier to travel, so we travel more." So that means that this number one executive in a Fortune 500 company is able to get out to meet more people more efficiently and more effectively if they have the right executive protection program. So that's how it's changing. It's not all the way there, and we still have work to do for people to understand that value proposition. We still have issues with people having misperceptions. So the principals having misperceptions basically because of a few things. They've seen it on TV, they've seen it in movies, or they've seen some other practices of their peers that are common practices, but they're not best practices. So we have to overcome these misperceptions. And one of those key things that is still an issue today is, I just want one person. Let's just do some basic math right up front. A typical executive is going to be working, especially a CEO, 60 hours a week, many of them way more. Then if you just have one person, that person has to be available to that executive at least while they're working. So that means that that individual also has things to do before they start supporting the executive and after they're done supporting the executive. So you're looking at 70 to 80 hours just for one position, which is two people. Getting that concept across of availability, readiness. Readiness is a key piece. Plus, you don't want to burn people out.
I love how you reframe this from what people typically think, which is EP is all about safety, which, yes, it is, but it's really more about productivity, and safety is a subcomponent of that. You can't be productive if you're not safe. And like you said, you can be way more productive if you are safe. We can let you do more. So I think we could end the podcast here because that one tip is worth everything right there.
Yeah, I mean, it's super important that it's a performance enhancer, really, for the people that are protected. So that's the way more people, I think, should look at it.
So, given those changes, what are the most significant areas of improvement for organizations regarding executive protection? Where do they have shortfalls that they could improve?
Well, I would say our end users and our principals need to be better educated. That's actually been something that I've been working on my entire career. How do we best communicate the value and how do we get them to think about it in the most appropriate way for executive protection? Now, the programs themselves and the service providers that support those programs, what I have seen and I've missed out on in the past myself is adding more structure, science, and technology to the EP programs and the EP service providers. The long-term success comes when you have structure, science, and technology. Now, structure is SOPs, structure is job descriptions, structure is job ladders, structure is performance evaluations that are specifically built for the jobs that these people are doing. Because oftentimes, especially Fortune 500 corporations, will not have a job ladder for an executive protection agent. And so, how do you then effectively evaluate their performance and give them a career path? So, these kind of structures can be built. The science piece, in my mind, is fairly new because what I'm talking about is the science of behavioral assessment. Now, how that can help is when you're vetting candidates to be executive protection agents. So you can understand what motivates them, how they think, where they are emotionally right now, and hopefully how they could fit into your organization. The better part of that actually is applying it on a regular basis with performance evaluations so that you're tracking the well being of these folks. I mean, you've got some EP agents that I know today that are clocking 120 hours in a week. So, what is their readiness? What is their cognitive ability? Then technology. Technology is obviously things like alert media, which I think are phenomenal. And having that so that you're constantly aware of what's happening. And it has to be an ongoing process, not just one single risk threat vulnerability assessment. And so you get this snapshot. You need the full movie and it needs to be ongoing. We've talked a lot in the past, and even still people do it now, about hard skills and soft skills. I think to be more helpful, to build better programs and better agents, we need to break it down into technical skills, cognitive skills, and personality skills. So this way, it's clearer for everyone what the expectations are. And then you get the opportunity to say, okay, well, we want to build on people's personality skills. How do we do that? What training do we do? But we know we need to because that's honestly where a lot of EP agents fail is their personality skills. They can have the best technical skills, they can have phenomenal cognitive skills, but if they don't fit in, I know for a fact they're not going to be there that long. So that's some of the significant areas for improvement. And there's plenty more, but I think I probably should stop.
Well, this all sounds incredibly multidimensional. Is it fair to say there's no one size fits all approach to keeping executives safe?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you have your standard technical, cognitive, and personality skills that you need as a baseline. But when you then talk about the safe, happy, and productive, and you get into the customization, you have to look at the risk, threats, and vulnerabilities of that specific individual. You have to prioritize, and along with them, what's their risk tolerance? So then prioritize, well, what are we going to do about these things that we've identified? And the cultures of organizations, the preferences of the individual that's being protected are all different. So there are common approaches, there are foundational skills, but typically what ends up happening is you come out with a customized vehicle of your very own every time you build a program.
Executive protection seems to be very personal. And when things are personal, there usually needs to be a high degree of trust. How important is trust in an overall successful program?
There are two equations that I like to use to help people understand what trust is and how to build it. Trust equals consistency and transparency over time. So now, when we're building a program, how do we build consistency? Well, that's with SOPs and training and all of these documented structures. The transparency comes with your regular communications, your quarterly business reviews, your quality control audits. That gives you then your transparency. So now you can say, okay, as a program, consistency and transparency over time are important. So now, how do we build consistency and transparency? At the top, you've got credibility plus reliability plus intimacy. So, credibility being you've actually been there, you actually have done it, and that's clear to people. Reliability, you do what you say you're going to do. Intimacy, you can build appropriate relationships all across the ecosystem. That all adds together. Now, you divide it by self orientation. So, the more self oriented I am, the harder it's going to be to build trust. I've always found that kind of interesting to say, okay, well, now, how do we understand someone's credibility, reliability, intimacy, and self orientation so that we can have an idea of how easy it is to build trust? Now, this is where maybe that's in that behavioral assessment where we can start to maybe identify some of those things and then get an equation for trust or trustworthiness.
Well, I'd like to come back to that paradigm shift we talked about at the beginning, where I joked we could end the podcast there, that if you move it from this idea of executive protection being only about safety to being one more about productivity, how does executive protection contribute to an executive's overall productivity and well-being? Can you talk more about that?
A lot of that has to do with travel. It's an older study now, but they did a survey of like 400 different CEOs, and 53% of the time they were traveling. That's a lot of time that folks are on the road and can be running into travel issues that can disrupt their thought process, that can keep them from thinking about what it is that they're doing next. They'll have 14 meetings, keynotes, prime ministers all throughout one day. And then the next day they're moving to the next country and they're doing it all over again. So every step needs to be optimized, including making sure that no one disrupts them from a security standpoint. From a privacy standpoint, you want to try to maintain their privacy. You want to make sure that they are logistically getting from A to B to C to D, making sure that they don't have issues based on their prominence, based on time and place predictability, which is a key issue now, especially with social media, and making sure that if a person is time and place predictable, that the EP team understands that and is doing everything to make sure that someone can't take advantage of that vulnerability.
I'd love to hear a real world example of your program in action. Do you have some kind of story you can share, maybe keeping the names out?
Well, we've had to convince people of the value over time. And so, one in particular, we had to provide data. And even though there were activities and issues that were clear about some concerning things going on, the principals still wanted us to prove and show some data. So, what we were able to do was look at the Secret Service exceptional case study. So, The Secret Service exceptional case study is a study of about 83 different assassinations and attacks in the 20th century. They put it out in 1997. If we boil it down, there is no standard attacker. There is no one that you can look at and say, that person's going to attack somebody. The other thing that was very clear from the study is that these people were attacked because they're prominent. Okay, so now, how do you then equate prominence to your principle so that you can provide some data and say, the Secret Service, who's studied this extensively, says that prominent people have a higher risk of being attacked. So this was before the internet was really big. But at that time, we could find out how often a principle was mentioned in the news globally.
Right.
What we were able to do was compare his mentions with politicians, his mentions with celebrities, his mentions with other business people. And then when compared to their peers in the business world, just completely dwarfed their peers in the business world. So you're the number one businessman in the world. And so your prominence is very high. So this is a reason why we suggest these things. And here's what we're going to do and why we're going to do it. And so we were able to get buy-in and we were able to build trust over time.
Well, before we wrap up, where can our listeners find you if they want to learn more about you or employer services or just have general questions?
You can find me on LinkedIn under Brian Jantzen. It's BrianJantzen.
Wonderful. Well, Brian, thank you so much for being on the show. Chock full of information. I love the paradigm shift from safety to productivity and this idea of you help us do X better, so we do more of X. I thought that was all fantastic.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate the opportunity.
To learn more about Brian and his work, click the links in the episode description. Video highlights from this episode can be found on Alert Media's YouTube page. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review the show wherever you get your podcasts. Stay safe out there.
Thank you for listening to the Employee Safety Podcast from Alert Media, the industry's most intuitive emergency communication and threat intelligence solution. To learn more about how to protect your people and business during critical events, visit alertmedia.com. Until next time.